This is Elizabeth Townsend. It is May 16th. This is an interview with Tom Chandler and for Dean Massaro's project on preparing for lives in the law. Well, let's just begin with the first basic question of why did you decide to go to law school? What made you think about being a lawyer?
Probably the conditions, the living conditions, and the other conditions of the people where I lived in Oklahoma and Arkansas during the darkest days of the Depression. The plight of those people probably inspired me or made me want to do something that might alleviate some of their problems.
What kind of problems? You mean like the...
Well, discrimination, poverty. They were taken advantage of by merchants, corporations, banks, and insurance companies, and a whole list of people or institutions that like to abuse poor people.
And were you living in Oklahoma at the time? Did you see
I lived in
firsthand?
Oklahoma part of the time, and then I lived for 4 years about in Arkansas.
And was your family affected by it, or was it, I mean, how close was it? I mean, was it personally, I mean, sometimes people say it's my own family, that we got robbed by these people. Was it a community that you saw suffering?
Well, it was both. It was both. One of the most vivid memories I have of a certain limited time frame was when they foreclosed the mortgage on our little farm and arrived with the lady who held the mortgage, arrived with the constable demanding that this poor white trash be immediately removed from the premises, and had quite a bit to say about it. And from that day forward, I've never wanted to foreclose anyone's mortgage.
Interesting. You had talked in your interview about the importance of rural lawyers, and that that should be some sort of programs or sort of encouragement of people to go back to rural spaces, that we don't have that as much. Do you think that seems to connect to sort of your own experiences early on? Do you still see that, I mean, it's 12 years later, do you see it as still a need, or how do you get people to those spaces so that there are people to protect people from those sorts of things?
I'm not too sure I've followed you.
The notion that a lot of people are going to big cities to practice law,
Right.
and sort of the notion that we should encourage people to go back to rural areas,
Mm-hmm.
and that did the place that you, I guess, let me think, there weren't lawyers there to help you and to your community?
No, they weren't available.
Interesting.
Although in one sense, people probably had a better chance then than they do now to get some help. And not necessarily in rural Arkansas, but in Arizona when I first started to practice, there was no legal aid at that time and no services for disadvantaged people, poor people. But there are very few people who, if they made enough stops, if they went to enough offices, wouldn't get some help.
Because of the kindness of the lawyers?
Because of the lawyer's dedication to the profession.
Do you think that's still true today?
No.
Why?
Greed and circumstances and necessity.
There's a lot of people criticize the law now that it's become too much of a business. Do you see that?
Yes.
And how?
I'm a critic.
Are you a critic?
You bet.
And what do we do about that? I mean, is there any way to fight that? I mean,
Well, you hope there's a resurgence toward better values, professional values. People who want to get rich shouldn't become lawyers. They should get into business or buy lottery tickets or do something else and not try to do it practicing law.
and do you think a lot of people now think that's where that law is about getting rich? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Quite a few.
Is that, I mean, we talked a lot to a lot of people about billable hours and sort of the obsession with billable hours.
It's a abomination. It's bad for the client, it's bad for the lawyer, and it's bad for the profession.
Could you talk a little bit about what it was like before the obsession with billable hours? What was, I mean, how did you bill your clients, or how did it work before?
Well, I tried to bill them on the basis of the value of what I'd done for them. And for many years, my bills simply read, services rendered in a certain manner with an amount. And I sent it to the client. And it was many, many years before I had any complaint, not one. And not because I was so generous or anything like that. It just was that was the way it was, and they expected to pay and thought what I was charging was right.
Did you decide how much to charge them based on how much they could afford to pay, or is it just based on the work or everything?
Well, some, yes. Much of the work I did early on was for insurance companies, casualty insurance companies, and I knew they could afford it. And if it was not that, then of course their ability to pay was taken into consideration.
What about the legal ethics say that you're not allowed to help out people when they're like, you're not supposed to give them money if they need to meet their rent or something like that, that there's all these strict things. And my dad practices law, and when I told him that, he thought, that was ridiculous, that sometimes people are just in need and that you have to help them out. Do you think that before the ethics, before testing people on ethics and things like that, did you find yourself in that situation?
Well, I'm not too sure that what the exact interpretation of that is, but I found nothing wrong with helping people, either with an outright grant or a loan.
What do you think a lawyer's job is? What do you think a lawyer's job is to their client? What are you doing for your clients?
Well, you're supposed to get their dispute or their problem resolved as quickly and as economically as possible and as favorably as possible.
And what if they want you to do something that you don't think is ethically right?
I don't do it.
You don't?
No.
And how do you tell them? Do you just tell them outright?
You bet. I don't have any trouble telling them I won't do it, and here's why I won't do it. I don't scold them. I just say I can't do that, and here's why I can't do it.
And could you do that when you were early on in your practice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I never had any problem with that.
Really? That's great. So if you hadn't become a lawyer, what do you think you would have done?
Well, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, but that got sidetracked early on. And I worked in construction, so probably I would have been in the construction in some capacity. Mm-hmm. I liked it, I enjoyed it. It was constructive. You built something, a bridge, a dam, a tunnel, mm-hmm. and took pride in what you'd helped build and went on to the next job.
Do you think that law is similar?
In some respects. In some respects, it's very destructive.
In what way?
Well, I don't enjoy a lawsuit between two rich people who want to get richer. I don't enjoy that operation.
What about the notion that law is all it is about money? That it's about the settlement of...
It's not true. It's not all about money. But and our profession is not the only profession that has this problem. You look at other professions, and you'll see that the pursuit of the dollar bill is foremost in the minds of people, members of that profession, other professions. So we're not unique. We're not unique. Sadly, we go along with some of that.
And what happens when you have people that's all that really matters to them? I mean, does that change how you work with them or the goals or?
I see them every day. And my philosophy is you do what you think you should do with your life and your legal profession, and I'll do what I think I should do. I don't try to reform them. I don't fuss with them about it.
And what did you think you should try to do with your legal profession?
What should I try to do?
Yeah.
Well, first I should behave like I think a lawyer should behave. That's the first thing I should do. And then perhaps I should try to encourage others to follow suit.
And how should a lawyer behave?
Well, the first thing he should do is appreciate it's a profession and not a business. His mission is to help people who need help and to have their interest foremost in his mind, and his interest being indeed secondary. Not how much money I can make on this case, but what I can do for the client.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to sound sanctimonious, but that's the way I feel.
On that note, I'm going to talk to you. I can either give you names, or we can do it sort of generally. You had talked about a number of people that you thought were really good lawyers.
Yes, I have.
And I thought maybe you could tell a little bit more, because when I read it, I wanted to know more about
Okay.
why you thought that.
Give me their names.
George Darnell.
Darnell was a bright guy. He was very, very bright. A talented lawyer. But a very rigid, uncompromising gentleman.
Are those good qualities? To be rigid and uncompromising?
No, I don't think so. I think it's you have to be firm at times, and you have to be able to say no. And but you can be too uncompromising, too rigid.
And when you've talked in a number of places, you said people were talented. I think students want to know what that means. Is it
Talented?
Yeah.
Well, he saw the problem. He cut right to the chase. He knew what the problem was, and attack it.
Do you think that's something that is learned, or that is just intuitive?
Both.
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 Ivo DiConsini.
Evo,
Uh-huh.
he was a beautiful man. Beautiful man.
In what way?
Every way. He was generous. He was caring. He never turned anyone away without trying to help them. Never. I turned a case away one time because I was too busy. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't take the case." And the lady that I had told that, her son was having a very serious criminal problem. And she left my office with a friend, and she was weeping as she went out into the little anteroom. And he came out to say something to his secretary, and he saw her, and he said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "Are you Judge DiConsini?" "Yes." "Can I talk to you?" He said, "Of course." Took her in his office. An hour later, he had the case. Charged her virtually nothing. And did as good a job as a very fine job he did with the case.
Do you think that young lawyers can do that now?
They can.
Should they?
Yeah, they should,
Yeah.
of course.
It seems like a lot of times the focus is on like big law firms.
Mhm.
And do you think that if you're in a smaller law firm that you have more room to be kinder?
No, I don't think so. Although the culture of the big firm might be a little more difficult to deal with in that area, but I don't think so. It can be done anywhere.
So in your firm, if people came in that were having trouble like that, would there be a space for them to get help? I mean, your firm isn't tiny anymore, but it's still
20 people, something
Yeah.
like that.
Is there room for that at your firm or at other firms? I mean, or is it still just been too hard because it's now so
Well,
business
I'm
oriented?
not, this is not a self-promotion project or promotion of my firm, but
No.
we do a great deal of pro bono work, a great deal. In fact, the two most difficult cases I had which I got rid of last week, were both pro bono cases.
Interesting. Do you think a lot of firms around town do pro bono work?
I think they do.
They do?
Yeah, I think they do.
It seems like from the interviews I read of that Tucson sort of kept that sort of space of sort of a smaller place that have kind people, and that people talk about Phoenix as not being as kind. Do you see that distinction, or is that a sort of false distinction of a sort of?
I see a difference in the attitude of the Phoenix bars compared to the Tucson bar. I'd much rather deal with Tucson lawyers. And strangely enough, someone from Phoenix recently told me that he couldn't stand dealing with Tucson lawyers, so I guess it's...
Does the bar help to set the tone? I mean, the bar association itself?
they try, of course. They make an effort. They have seminars, and they have a committee on, what do they call it? I forgot what they call it now. Professionalism.
Right.
And they try.
All right, one more question about George Darnell. You said that he wrote beautifully.
Oh yeah, he was a great writer.
What makes a great writer?
I don't know. Clarity, simplicity, get right to it. He wrote very, very well. And you knew what he had said when you read it.
Romilly? Is that how you say
Linus
it?
Romilly?
Uh-huh. You said he could do it all. He could do it all.
He did everything, yeah.
And what does that mean? I mean...
He was good at drafting, preparing a contract. He was good at forming a business relationship. He was good at trying cases. He was good at appealing cases. He was an all-around lawyer.
And do you think that everyone should strive to be that way?
No, not necessarily. Whether we like it or not, there's a room for specialists. We have to have them. We've got them. And to a certain extent, they ought to stay in their own pen there and not wander out. They'll get in trouble if they get too far away from home.
You also talked about, and then we'll move on to more questions, but in terms of that oral history, you also talked about the cost of litigation getting out of control. I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that, and that if people have just an honest dispute that they can't afford it.
Can't afford a lawyer. Can't afford it.
And so Dean Massaro said that there has to be some space for the middle class, that we have to make it affordable for people, that no one can afford it, but that we need to change it. Do you?
Well, we do. We need to work very diligently to see that people of ordinary means can afford lawyers when they need them. Alternate dispute resolutions, more mediation, more arbitration, more less discovery over nothing.
When did that happen? When did that change happen?
It was gradual. Gradual. We take depositions now to prove that someone doesn't know anything about the case, instead of taking a deposition of someone who does.
You had said something about pro bono. I'm sorry, I keep jumping around, but pro bono. We'll do a little bit more on the pro bono. Do you think that people? You had said that that sometimes it's hard because people feel like they're taking charity with pro bono. Do you think that's still the case? That people feel sort of like, I don't know. That you said that they feel that if they have to go through an agency, that process was sort of humiliating.
Yeah.
And
there's a certain amount of, it demeans people to a certain extent to have to go on their way. The first place they go to a legal aid office, and it's not it just doesn't have the right atmosphere because they can't afford it. And they're busy and there are people in and out, and they feel like a commodity rather than a person. And if they can go to a lawyer's office and feel comfortable, and the lawyer makes them feel comfortable, and they don't feel like they're getting relief or charity, but they are when it's all over, I think it's better for them.
Do you think that people still feel comfortable to go to lawyers' offices when they know they can't afford it? Or is the culture changed?
No, if they can't afford it or if they think that they're going to get whacked, of course they don't feel comfortable.
Right.
Matter of fact, they won't go.
Right.
Stay home.
All right, we're almost done with this. As you talked about a little bit about mediation in that one, and you said that it was really important to have a skillful mediator. And I thought maybe you could talk about the qualities of a skillful. We have talked to a couple of other people who were talking about mediation, but we haven't really talked about what makes a mediator really a good mediator.
Same thing makes a good umpire.
And what is that?
Well, call it like you see it. Understand people and be patient. Try to get them together. Try to get them to see someone else's point of view and see their deficiencies and the other person's strength. It's just people have a knack for that too. Some people don't have the patience to do it. Some people have patience to do it. I really believe that no serious case, no serious piece of litigation I think the first thing that should happen to that case is that both sides look at it and say, should this be settled? Should we get rid of this right now?
And do they do that usually?
Pardon me?
Is that usually done?
No, it's usually not done.
Because there's more money to be made?
Well, I don't want to indict him for that. That may be in some people's mind. It's just, a lot of it's habit, you know. Well, I don't know enough about it, well, you know something about it. You got the complaint there you're looking at. This is what they claim happened, and this is what your client tells you happened, and if there's some responsibility there, chance of liability, that ought to be discussed up front. What's going to cost to get it resolved ought to be talked about. What could happen, what's it likely to happen, and if we can dispose of this in a certain price range, why don't we do it?
Did you worry about, sometimes I think that young lawyers worry that if they try to do all of that, that somehow they're going to be sued for malpractice down the road, that somehow they haven't covered their bases. And did you ever worry about malpractice in terms of making decisions, or was it an issue that...
No. If you run scared, you'll not get anything done. You certainly want to be right. You want your whatever you do to be good and sound, but you can't sit around and wring your hands and say, well, suppose I'm wrong here, then what? You certain issues that you can't be 100% sure on. You ought to tell the client. They ought to know what the chances are and the risks are.
What happens when you make a mistake?
What happens? What kind of mistake?
I don't know. We've talked to some people. We haven't gotten much response on this question. People don't like to talk about mistakes, little mistakes or big mistakes, because I think sometimes students are afraid of what happens if they try their best, but something they mess up, and sort of what happens when you mess up. I don't know if you have ideas, thoughts about that.
Well, if you do, you get your client in and said, I booted it here, made a mistake.
And what happens? I mean, is the client, what happens in that case? I mean, have you had situations where it could be fixed, or what if it can't be fixed?
Well, sometimes it can't be fixed. Statute of limitations is run. Didn't file the case, and statute ran.
And what happens when a young lawyer makes a mistake and they have to go to you to tell you? I mean, I think people get scared and they don't know what to do when they think they've made a mistake.
Well, if they do, I hope they come quickly, promptly. And you do what you need to do to correct it.
Do you expect young lawyers to make mistakes?
Sure. From time to time, everybody will. Might not even be his fault. It might be that he gave a note to his secretary and said, put this on the calendar for answer, and the secretary didn't do it.
And when young lawyers are in a firm like your firm that has various levels of lawyers, who do they look towards? What's your relationship with the youngest lawyers versus the older lawyers? And is there a mentoring? Like, where's the mentoring? Do you know what I mean? Like, when you get to a firm and there's the senior partners, do you have any sort of connection with them, or do you just stay on the next person above you?
Well, I would hope that our people can go to anyone in the firm that they think you should go to. Again, this is not a testimony in my behalf, but I tell young people, come see me if you want to. I might not be able to help you. I'm old and feeble and I might not know anything, but at least give it a whirl if you want to. Come in. Doors open. Walk in. And they do.
That's really nice. Make sure there's no more questions. You also talked about judges in your oral history.
Right.
One was Bill Truman.
Bill Truman.
And you said that to try a jury case was a joy.
Yep.
Because he ruled promptly, generally right, and had good command.
Yeah. He was a good lawyer.
And I wanted to know what the difference between being a good lawyer and a good judge was. Is it the same qualities or different qualities?
In some respect, the same qualities. Understanding issues and cutting to the chase and knowing what was involved and what was significant, what wasn't. And a judge can't be an advocate. A good lawyer has to be an advocate. A judge can't do that. He's got to leave that alone. Truman, if you tried a case to him without a jury or argued a motion to him, he might never decide it. It might never get decided. He just sit there forever and just go away.
Why?
He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't open his mail. He had his mail stacked up unopened.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a terrible thing.
Terrible
He was a
thing.
wonderful guy, but he's got to decide these things, and
and there's nothing you can do about it.
well, you can, yes, you can make him decide it. You can, and the rule that something had to be decided within a certain period of time was the Truman Rule. That was enacted for Judge Truman.
Interesting.
But I really loved the guy. He was a good man and a good judge. He just had that fault, which is rather serious.
All right, let me see if there are any other questions on this part. I don't think there are. All right. Oh, yes, there is one. The notion of an honorable profession. I've interviewed Professor Ayers, and he talked a little bit about it. We talked about a couple other people about what makes being a lawyer an honorable profession. And you talked about it a little bit already, but I thought maybe we could just do it one more time in terms of, if, again, sort of looking to students, sort of what they should be thinking about when they begin their practice so that they are honorable.
Well, commitment to justice. To see people that justice is done. And as a lawyer, you're obliged to advocate for your client, to be an advocate, and to work hard for the client. You're not obliged to use a scorched earth policy. You're not obliged to take undue advantage. You're not obliged to misrepresent anything to the court or to a trier of facts. And if people observe the basic rules of good manners and professionalism, when both sides are presented, then hopefully the result will be good. But
what happens when the other side isn't, they're mean and they don't tell you the truth and all those sorts of things? How do you deal with that?
Depends on what the circumstances are. I received a lecture, a real dressing down from a young lawyer not too long ago. And really, I mean, just over nothing and over something that I couldn't help. And when she finished, I said, well, I've been reprimanded. I left.
Do you have other suggestions in terms of if you don't want to be bullied by people, or if you find them being deceitful? Are there other ways to deal with them?
Well, some people you can sit down and talk to and say, now look, this has gone far enough. We're lawyers, we're adults, let's act like it. And it works with some people. I had a lawyer who was relatively new in town. He was an older lawyer. He practiced somewhere else. And he had this case. It was a miserable case. It was awful. And I was defending the case. And I said to him, after the deposition of his client, I said, what's wrong with you? What are you doing with a lousy case like this and causing my client all this grief and trouble? What's the matter with you? He said, I am the newest member of the firm. I am the low man on the totem pole. Do you think I went out and solicited this case? I didn't. The people in the office said, we've taken the case, you've got to handle it. What did you want me to do? Tell the client that he was a louse and kick him out of the office, or did you want me to do the best I could? Well, I was embarrassed, and I should have been. Here I'm reprimanding him for doing the best job he could for his client. Well, that stopped me. And the people that have any sensitivity, if you talk to them about something, that sometimes you might as well talk to a fire plug. You get a better response. You don't get a dumb answer from the fire plug.
All right. All right. Here's some fun questions. What is one of your happiest moments in the law? People have answered it all different ways, but do you have, like, when you think about like happy moments in the law for you, what comes to mind?
An adoption proceedings where a little baby found a wonderful home, and new parents who wanted a child so badly had a child. It was always a wonderful experience.
How do you deal with difficult clients? We've talked about that a little bit, but and what is a difficult client?
A lot of them are difficult. Well, you got to be understanding to start with. You know, they've been sued, or they're suing someone, and things aren't going well for them, and they're angry and they're frustrated, and it's costing them too much money, and other people are lying, and they're not, and you just have to be patient and talk to them, and try to make them understand what the life in the courtroom is like, and sure, you have difficult clients, and I've been pretty brutal with clients at times.
In what way?
What?
In what way?
Well, one of them told me one of the guy was a real crook, terrible crook. He said, I'm basically an honest man. And I said, if you say that again, I'm likely to have a seizure. You won't have a lawyer. You're the biggest crook I've ever known. He said, well, you're right. He said, but I came from my father's side of the house. My mother had good people. That was his response.
And do you deal differently with different clients? I mean, do you
Sure.
have to?
Sure. Some people you just have to. I mean, if um, they're insecure, they want to tell you about their problems, on and on and on. I had a case one time where there were 4 defendants, and the men worked and the ladies didn't, and they were all from Iowa, and they'd sold their farms in Iowa and came here to semi-retire, so they bought a trailer park, and it didn't work. They couldn't agree on the management. It just didn't work, so they sold it. And they sold it to a person who was not a resident owner. I mean, he ran it from afar, and it was he was awful. People didn't like him, and they complained and moved out. So he sued these 4 people for fraud, claiming they had misrepresented the property. And it was not. It was a baseless case. It really was a frivolous lawsuit. And the men would work, but the ladies would talk, and they'd come see me. And they'd sit and they'd ask the same questions over and over and over again. And we'd go through the same thing. And one of them was hard of hearing. So she would say to the leader, "What did he say?" And so she would interpret, what did he interpret? They called me one Monday, which is law in motion, the worst day of the week. "We just have to see you. We've got a lot of things we need to talk to you about." "Well, I'll be back in court at 11 o'clock. Come in at 11. So they came in. And I was a couple minutes late. And come in, ladies, sit down. Had this long list. Said, "Now, we're sorry that we take so much of your time. We're sorry." I said, "Now, Ms. Peterson, you don't go into the grocery store and buy a big order of groceries and tell the grocer, 'I'm sorry I spent all this money,' do you? No. Well, I charge you for the time I spend with you. And I love to have you here because we go over the same thing. I don't have to really do any research or look anything up, or even read the file. I can answer the questions. We've gone through these things many times. And so you take all the time you want, come in anytime you want. I'm available." The hard-of-hearing lady said, "What did he say?" She said, "I'll tell you later."
Yeah.
She started crossing the list off, and when we got, and she said, "We were 2 minutes late." I said, "I noticed that, Ms. Peterson." She gave up through that list, and they were gone. And when we started to go to trial, I almost had to send the army to get them in. They didn't want to come. I had to haul them in to get them in the courtroom.
That's a good story. All right, about the trial stuff. We'll do the trial work stuff. I know there isn't a typical day, so sometimes we go through sort of what a typical day is. I don't know if we can do that. Can you do that with it being a trial lawyer or trial work?
No, I don't think there is a typical day. If you're in the court, of course, there is a typical day.
And
You're up. You're up and you're in court and you're there and you're back at lunch trying to get some things together, and you're back at 5 and you're thinking about the next day, and you're either neutral or mad or sad or glad. There's no typical day. It's all different. It's very stressful.
And how do you deal with the stress? Do you think people have to take a certain type of person to do trial work, do you think?
Yeah, some people can do it with less stress than others. Some people really enjoy it.
Do you enjoy it?
No,
You don't?
I never did enjoy it. Never did.
Why?
Well, there's always an element of sadness in it, even for people that should lose.
Why?
Well, yeah, after all, everybody is a human being, and they probably well-intentioned and believe that they have something coming, they should prevail, and they go down and they don't. And even though legally and morally they weren't entitled to it, you can't. You've got to, feel. And I've left some courtrooms with cases that I've prevailed in feeling sick.
Because it shouldn't have been?
Shouldn't have been. Shouldn't have been.
So, should you, I mean, you have to do the best for your client,
Right, you have to do a professional job.
even if you don't think that the
Well,
outcome is fair.
Yeah, you can't be the judge. Someone else does that. And you try not to overstep. You try not to take any advantage. You try your best to be fair about it. But sometimes, for a variety of reasons, and there's some cases that are very, very sad, where your client's not responsible. A guy with a leg gone. He's got his leg gone. And it was his fault. The accident was his fault. And he walks out empty-handed. And that's not you wish that you didn't have to be there to preside over that.
Before you get to trial, do you ever try to get your clients to do the right thing, in the sense that that you say, I mean, you know that you might win, but you're trying to get them to do something different?
Yeah, that if you're dealing with insurance companies, it's a little difficult to instill a charitable instinct in those people. And I don't criticize them for it. Their business is to make money. Their business is to defend lawsuits, and so they have a right to a defense. I did have a case once where the other lawyer on the other side, who was a very, very good lawyer at one time, but he'd gone completely to pot. And he was mishandling the case grossly, just awfully. And it was evident he was. And I made an offer that I thought was fair, and they rejected it. And the judge was deciding whether to declare a mistrial or what to do with the case. Well, it happened that the superintendent of claims for that company had used that lawyer earlier in the case. He knew who he was, and the guy, the superintendent, was in LA. And I called him and said, this is the situation. The case is being grossly mishandled. The judge knows it. Everybody knows it. And what's going to happen is he's going to blow the case. But then she's going to get another lawyer, and she's going to get a new trial, and we're going to be back and we're going to try it again. And so why don't we renew the offer and see? And I think they'll accept it now. And not only will we get rid of the case as cheaply as possible, but we'll also do something for the lawyer who really needs some help. And he said, okay, let's do it. So once in a while, you get a person who has a heart, and you can do things like that.
What about, I'm going to keep jumping around because we have lots of questions. What about juries?
Juries? I'm ambivalent. I wouldn't change the system, but I'm ambivalent.
Why?
Well, they have an uncanny knack of doing it right most of the time. But there's so many cases that the group of people off the street aren't capable of handling. Just can't do it.
Like what kind of case?
Oh, a patent infringement case, for example, a complicated business transaction, for example. And you wonder sometimes about some of the cases about professional jurors.
People who just are jurors all the time.
Who get paid to be jurors. It's smart. Don't be someone that has no agenda. Specialized cases.
To implement that kind of system? To implement a professional?
It won't happen.
It won't happen.
No. It
What?
won't happen.
Have you seen a lot of changes in juries over? Have they changed the way the law has changed as well?
Well, I don't know what the answer is, and I haven't been facing many juries lately, but the cross-section of the community doesn't appear now as it once did.
Because people get out of it?
I think so.
And because they don't want people on the jury, that people get
People
dismissed.
get out of it. You look at who's on the list and look at the panel, and you'll sometimes find a scarcity of professional people. And I've had some, I won't condemn Pima County, but in an out county one time, I had a jury that
Not good.
oh,
What about law students who might want to practice law, but they want to maybe do other things? Do you have advice for them, like go into politics or go into business or to do other things with their lives? You have thoughts about sort of?
well, if they want to practice law, if that's what they really want to do, they better do it. Because if you're going to do it, you better do it or not do it. Now, that doesn't mean that once they start that they shouldn't get into politics or be house counsel or or go into business. There's no, a legal education is very valuable. It's good training. Not that you're going to go to in business and spend all your time looking after your company's legal affairs. If you do, there's something wrong with your company. But a legal education is very valuable too, as is any education, but I think a legal education is particularly valuable. It's problem solving oriented. It's oriented toward solving problems.
Do you think that it makes, if they want to go into politics, that it's a good background?
I think so. I think it's a good background for that.
And you've been involved in politics here quite a bit.
In what way?
Is that true?
What?
Have you been involved with politics here in town?
Not really.
Not really? Are you?
I ran for one office in my life.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What office was that?
I ran for the president of the student bar when I was in law school.
And how did that go?
I didn't get a vote.
You didn't get a vote?
Not one.
Not even yours?
Not even mine.
Oh my goodness.
I wouldn't be a member of a student bar association would have me for a president anyway.
That's pathetic. That's very funny. Have you helped people? I mean, have you been influential at all in politics? No.
No, I have chaired a lot of campaigns.
And what does that mean? What do you do when you chair a campaign?
When you chair a campaign,
Mm-hmm.
depends on how diligent your candidate is. If you chair Morris Udall's campaign, you don't do very much. He does it. He runs his own show. If you chair someone else's campaign, you get involved in fundraising, you get involved in policy matters, you get involved in all kinds of issues.
And do you think that lawyers should be get involved with those sorts of things, of policy and?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Well, the lawyers should be concerned with public good, public interest. They should be concerned about that, and because they should know what happens if you have a legislative body that doesn't treat people well, that discriminates against poor people or against old people.
Mm-hmm.
And that they should be active in politics. They should be out there doing something, and for the good of the cause. So they should be.
And do you think many are?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we can fault the bar for that. They're there, and it's not all in their own self-interest either. Just a lot of I've always said the best people I've ever known have been lawyers, and the worst.
Because they have the power to use it good for good and for evil, all the things they know and do. And
Well, we have some, we've had some lawyers who have had a profound effect on what happens in this, in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them have done it with, by being in the political arena.
Mm-hmm.
Udall, the two Udalls, Morrison, Stewart, Babbitt, Bruce Babbitt, Johnny Rhodes, who was a lawyer in Maricopa County. We've had a lot of lawyers who have made a substantial contribution. And we've had non-politicians who have made a great contribution too. People who work in well, Bill Morris, the lawyer, public lawyer.
All right, I'm going to switch topics again back to the law school. What do you think the law school should be doing? Some people say that it's a place to get sort of a liberal arts education or train someone's mind. Others say that you should be getting more practical experience so you're better prepared when you go out to practice. What do you think we're doing here at law school, and what should we be doing here?
Emphasis on core courses.
And core courses, property,
Evidence,
all the basics.
torts, contracts, and with a liberal sprinkling of new matters that have come into existence. So we all get our legal education repealed every so often. So and we used to teach courses that shouldn't have even been taught.
Like what?
Agency, partnerships. Agency probably yes, partnerships no. You pick that up in agency and business relationships. So, and at the time it was perfectly appropriate. But now, what about environmental law or employment law or other things? The face of the practice changed so greatly.
Mm-hmm. What about the whole notion of money and fundraising for law schools? I know, Demas said that you helped to sort of disconnect how the money was raised from, I guess, the Arizona Foundation to make the U of A law school sort of separate and distinct. What do those sort of things do to a law school? I mean, I imagine it gives it more empowerment to do whatever it wants to do, but sort of what role does money play in sort of all of this?
Well, at one time, and this doesn't apply only to law schools, it applies to higher education generally. One time the private schools were privately endowed, the Harvards, the Yales, the Dartmouths, and could afford and did provide a very good education. For a long time in this country, the public schools were pretty well supported. And in particular in certain areas, you look at the Big Ten schools, there's not a weak sister in the Big Ten, they're all good. Some better than others, but all good. Unfortunately, because of other demands on the public purse, many other demands, the public is not willing to spend the money it needs to spend to finance public education. Now, specific to the law school. In the first place, the legislators, as a general rule, don't care much for lawyers or law schools. They're not excited about them at all. So they just soon pass them by. So if you didn't have some means of raising money to help this school or any public school, then you fall further and further behind in the quality of what you're doing. So it is a necessity. It has to be done. It simply has to be done. And I'm sure that there's not a dean alive that looked forward to raising funds at a rapid pace. They want to teach, they want to look at their school and think about the quality of what they're doing, but unfortunately they have to get out in the fundraising business, have to do it. If they don't, their institution will dry and blow away.
That's such a big part of it now.
It is. It has to be. Sadly, but it's true. It has to be.
And U of A's had some pretty amazing things happen to it recently. Do you think that it needs more from more alumni and more places? I mean, is it always just a constant getting more money?
Probably. The people at Arizona have been less generous, the grads, in their support of the law school than in many places.
Interesting.
It's pretty hard to extract money from lawyers. It's not an easy task.
We've asked some people about their philosophy of life and how that connects to their practice of law. we like Professor Kozolchek talked a great deal about that, and Professor Ayers a little bit. I thought maybe you could talk about sort of how you live your life and how you practice law, and are they the same? Do you do it the same way, or is it different?
I assume that the Fifth Amendment applies here. I'm not going to confess to anything about how I live my life, and I will. I believe that I have made a passing grade at the practice. I think I've passed, but I'm developing my philosophy of life as I go along.
Very good. I thought maybe we could talk about your daughter and a little bit about what you thought of when she wanted to first go to school, and did you encourage her to go to law school, or?
No, I didn't. I didn't encourage Terry to go to law school. Terry is a very unusual person. She's a unique person, and I'm very proud of her. I'm proud of her because she is willing, and always has been willing, to sacrifice money and position for doing what she thinks she ought to do and what is worthwhile. She left a tenured position that she had tenure and wonderful benefits. She was a first assistant U.S. attorney in charge of the Tucson office. She left that and went down and became a juvenile court commissioner because she believes firmly that the most important court in Pima County is the juvenile court, that she can save children, she can save families, and she can do so much good there. And so I'm very proud of her. But I didn't encourage her to go to law school. She has a mind of her own, and she said she was going, and she went. And she would come up here with her baby, bring it to class, which I thought was all right. Some of the professors didn't think much of her, but she's just a good thing. She really is. She's bossy. But she's very good.
So do you see, I'm not implying anything on the bossy part, but do you see similarities between your style and her style?
Of course not.
No?
No, I'm not bossy.
Not bossy? No.
No.
So she got the bossiness from her mom, you think?
I don't know. Maybe she picked it up somewhere else. I don't know. She's a good thing. And I didn't discourage her at all. But she's her own thing, you know. She worked in our firm for a while. When things didn't suit her, she left. And didn't whine to me about it. Came in one day and said, I'm leaving. Okay. She's good. I have a granddaughter that's going to be a lawyer too.
Really?
Gina. She's here now.
She is?
Yeah.
At the law school?
Yes.
Really? That's great.
Huh?
That's great. You've got a long... And were you the first one in your family to go to law school?
The first one to go to school. Yeah. My parents were not real happy to learn that I was in law school.
Why?
Well, they thought very little of lawyers. They joined the mob when it came to lawyers. They didn't think much of them.
And did they change their mind?
Huh?
Did they change their mind?
I doubt it.
Yeah?
I doubt it.
All right. Well, let me think. I don't know if I think I'm running out of questions.
Okay.
Do you have any other advice to students as they decide what to do with their lives and where to go and what to be?
No. No.
No. No, that's all right. Well, I think we're done then. This has been great.
That's great.
This is really great.
All right.
Thank